Derrick Henry to the Ravens, Austin Ekeler to the Commanders, Joe Mixon to the Texans. Running backs are changing teams left and right. We discuss the fantasy impact and all the running back movement on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst over at NFL Network.
And I'm your other host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy betting and a whole lot of free agency right now at sportingnews.com. And it got crazier. We thought the first day was pretty crazy, Michelle, but running backs ruled the day two. And really, if you have a ruler, it's going to be the king. And King Henry, we'll talk about him and a lot of big moves. So running backs, who said the running back market was dry?
Absolutely insane how many running backs have changed. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So let's just jump right into these running backs because there's been 10 veteran running backs now, like notable veteran running backs that have changed teams. So you got Barkley going to the Eagles, Jacobs Packers, Aaron Jones to the Vikings, Tony Pollard to the Titans, Swift to the Bears, Austin Ekeler to the Commanders, Joe Mixon to the Texans, Zack Moss to the Bengals, Devin Singletary to the Giants, and Gus Edwards to the Chargers. That list is insane how much movement we've had. But let's start at the biggest signing that we all predicted. It was so easy to see. Derrick Henry to the Baltimore Ravens. I absolutely love it. Love it for fantasy. Love it for the Ravens. What are your thoughts on his fantasy value this upcoming year?
Yeah, I love this, this destination for sure. I mean, pretty good money for him and for the team. I think it's reasonable because he probably has a couple years left. It's a 2-year deal for $20 million. So that's what they're looking at. And Derrick Henry's looking at them as well as a short-term extension of his career. We've seen this with other running backs late in their career, trying to maybe land with the right team that can push them into a ring situation, Super Bowl contention. We know the Ravens are right there. They were the number one seed in the AFC last year. So they're hoping Derrick Henry can give them a little bit more big play running in their offense and really continue what Gus Edwards did, scoring 13 touchdowns on the ground and really being a good complement to that downfield passing game of Lamar Jackson. It's another Heisman combination here. So Lamar and Derrick Henry are going to play well off each other running the ball as well, right? I mean, who do you go with, right? If you're seeing a little bit of a zone read action in the backfield, do you go with Lamar? Do you go with Derrick Henry? It's hard because you could be burned by either guy with speed, just them breaking one tackle and going for 30, 40 yards. So it's a really fun pairing, and I love it here because, again, you have 13 vacated touchdowns by Edwards, who ended up with the Chargers. So you know there's going to be a lot of scoring potential in this offense. And Derrick Henry, look, a lot of his value in his last season in Tennessee was based on his scoring. So he doesn't need to catch a lot of passes. Gus Edwards didn't do that. He retained good value. But the difference is I think Derrick Henry is going to eat up those chunk rushing yards. So they're going to push him up here. So I easily see another 1,000-yard season at the very least. I see more like 1,200 with about 10 scores. I mean, that's what I would expect from Derrick Henry, at least in this offense with the Ravens.
Yeah, that's probably lowballing it for him.
Yeah.
I will say it's fun
I'm
because
playing
Derrick
safe.
Henry leads the NFL in rushing yards since 2018. And then Lamar Jackson leads all quarterbacks in rushing yards since 2018. So a great duo back there. I will say maybe this worries us a little bit about Lamar Jackson's upside for fantasy in terms of, does Derrick Henry steal all the rushing touchdowns again from him like we saw this past year? We're saying the Ravens running backs can't possibly steal as many, but with Derrick Henry here, they could. I will say one landing spot I think is pretty gross. It's Austin Ekeler. He ends up with the Commanders, gets a very small deal, 2 years, $8.4 million. It can go up to 11.4, but I don't know if he just has a terrible agent or what. He should have made more money than that. But when it comes to the Commanders backfield, there's still Brian Robinson Jr. there. I know Antonio Gibson left. We'll talk about him later in the show. But is this Eckler's backfield now, or is it just a split between Brian Robinson Jr. and Eckler? And do they just both hurt each other?
Well, I think they're going to use Eckler in the right way. And what gives me a little bit of confidence here is a couple things. You have Cliff Kingsbury. They're going to spread the field a little bit. So it's going to be trying to use the passing game to get to multiple guys. And I think getting Zach Ertz kind of shows you that, like a tight end that can still produce, but he's a guy that maybe can work offline a little bit, right? So you're spreading the ball around. And you look at Antonio Gibson, he didn't live up to the expectations of being the complementary, consistent receiving back to Brian Robinson Jr. Now, I think Austin Ekeler can do that. Now, do I love it for fantasy? No, I actually like it more for reality because it's going to help a young quarterback, presumably Drake May or Jaden Daniels, with check down. So he could see a lot of passing volume, right? But I think if you go from PPR to standard, Austin Ekeler's value continues to shrink, right? So I think now it's a better reality move than it is a fantasy move. I'll just say that straight up, because I think he's going to help them and kind of settle their offense a little bit, be a good complement to Brian Robinson Jr. But problem is in fantasy, we don't like the split touches, the uncertainty about who's going to get the ball at the goal line. Robinson can also be a decent receiver. So, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you're going to get. I think he's a good presence for the Commanders because they're a young team and they might need kind of the veteran positivity and leadership there as they make the transition. But his value might be seen in the locker room, in the passing game, but I don't know how much you're going to get it that translates into real fantasy numbers. So again, some moves can be that way, right? They're good in reality, but not great for fantasy. And I think this is one of them.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes down to is it Drake May or Jaden Daniels? Because if it's Daniels, you're worried maybe he doesn't check down the ball as
Yeah.
much, and that's really what Eckler needs. I mean, Robinson Jr. saw 43 targets last year. Antonio Gibson saw 59. So them combined, a great running back target share there in that backfield. It's just that was Sam Howell. So it's going to be a completely different quarterback, completely different system. It's just hard to tell. And so much of Eckler's production not only comes from targets, but then also the insane amount of touchdowns he scored the 2 years prior. Is there going to be that opportunity with the Commanders compared to what it was with the Chargers? Probably not. Now, two really fun moves happened last night, like back to back, right? So at first we saw Joe Mixon gets released from the Bengals and Zack Moss signs, and it's like, oh, shoot. But then actually this morning it ends up that Joe Mixon gets traded to the Texans. Zack Moss is now with the Bengals. So two very exciting offenses with two running backs that should see great volume next year. Let's start with the bigger name, Joe Mixon, lands with the Texans. We were saying what a good landing spot that would be for any running back. So, yeah, he gets cut from the Bengals, but lands in another great spot where he should get a ton of volume and a lot of scoring opportunities. Do you think his production goes up or down? His fantasy production goes up or down now that he's changing teams? I think it stays pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah, it stays about the same to me. I think this is again a better move for fantasy than it is for reality. I'm not sure what Joe Mixon has left on the table, but I'll say that he's going to get numbers as a volume-based player, right? That's what he was in Cincinnati. He's not a special back. He's not going to excite Texans fans, but you give him the ball in certain situations, high leverage, throw to him a few times, get him scoring in the red zone. All of a sudden, the fantasy numbers are not that bad as an RB2, and we saw that where? In Cincinnati. So it's a very similar offense, right? They want to pass the ball with CJ Stroud. This is a compliment, Mixon. So it's very interesting they didn't go after one of the bigger names. I thought they might be in the mix for Eckler as a passing team, or Saquon Barkley, or Tony Pollard. They didn't do that. Maybe they knew Joe Mixon was going to be there. That's all they wanted, right? Someone cheap, someone there that can handle the ball and be a veteran presence in that backfield. Because there's a lot of young players on that team there. So they wanted to maybe mix it with Dalton Schultz and Joe Mixon. You got the young receivers in there. So I think Mixon is going to be fine. Like, he's not going to be spectacular or exciting for fantasy, but we'll look up. He'll have 8 to 9 touchdowns. He'll probably have decent scrimmage numbers, and he's going to finish an RB2. He's just not going to be one we're going to bang the table for in it by any means.
Yeah, and then obviously I got super excited about Zack Moss with the Bengals. He gets a spot. He gets a chance, right? We'll see if they add anyone else. I don't think they'd add anyone else in free agency at running back, but maybe the Bengals could be a team that drafts a running back. But right now it looks like it's going to be Zack Moss and Chase Brown in this backfield. I know some people are very excited about Chase Brown. He had 44 carries last year as a fifth-round rookie. Like, I think they signed Zack Moss to be the main lead guy there. He's not going to take every snap like he did with the Colts in the beginning of the year. Like, I know that's not going to be his workload, but I do think he's going to be that goal line back. There's going to be so many opportunities for scoring in this offense with the Bengals. And we know that's like where Moss excels, right around that goal line. So I can see this being a double-digit touchdown year for Moss, getting 200 plus carries, and this being a career year for him. I'm very, very excited for that he gets this opportunity.
Yeah, you look at this backfield, really what they're doing is creating a younger version of what they had with Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine, right? You have that quick back who can be a big asset in the passing game when needed as a change of pace, who's Chase Brown. And now you have this back, Zack Moss, who's reliable. You can put him out there in pass protection to keep Joe Burrow up. You can finish in the red zone with him. So look, it's a smart move by the Bengals. They're doing the same exact thing they had a couple years ago, but you paid your quarterback. You're going to have to pay Jamar Chase. Save some money and get a guy that's going to be just as good as Joe Mixon here. So this is maybe a hot take on this side, but and I don't think you'll disagree with it, but I think Zack Moss is going to outproduce Joe Mixon
Let's
there
go.
in Cincinnati and in Houston. So he's going to be better than Joe Mixon was last year. He'll be better than Joe Mixon was this year, will be this year. So all this stuff says that, look, Moss is in a better situation. No offense to the Texans passing game. It's very good. We know it's CJ Stroud, but the Bengals are a little bit notch higher when Joe Burrow's healthy, right? This offense is very dangerous, especially looking like they're going to have the receivers intact. They added Mike Gesicki, but that's another name in the mix here. So I look at this. Zack Moss is going to get a lot of opportunities for this team. And look, Chase Brown, I knew he was not going to be the lead back. There's no way. I mean, he's a good, quick back. He's going to have his moments flashing here, but they needed a steady back. And Zack Moss exactly was that, filling in for Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis.
Oh, I'm so excited. If anyone's not watching on YouTube, I have the biggest smile on my face talking about Zack Moss and hearing Vinny just talk him up. But we'll see how irrationally I have him ranked as we go throughout the offseason. I'm sure I'm not going to be chill about it. But there's even a lot more running back news that we have to hit here in our second segment. We did already touch on Tony Pollard and Barkley and DeAndre Swift on yesterday's show. So if you're looking for those names, those are on yesterday's show. But we still have Aaron Jones and some other big running back names we have to discuss here in our next segment.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And if you've seen the show before, you know where I'm based. I'm in North Carolina, and some big news happened this week. All of a sudden, my FanDuel account is good to go here in North Carolina. So that's exciting news. And for you in all the states where you can participate, it's great because what's coming up this weekend? March Madness. We already have a lot of madness there with the NBA going into full swing. Say goodbye to the busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. That's right. Just like an NBA game, you can look at each NCAA game, whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed. It's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook, including those of you from North Carolina and Duke. You guys can now get in the action. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's right. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all in the big dance. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockdown and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets there in Phoenix. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show, and we want to look at another inter-division move here. This is weird because Jamal Williams left the Packers to go to the Lions, and now Aaron Jones, his former backfield mate, is doing the same. He's replacing Alexander Madison for the Vikings. I kind of really like this move. It's a quick rebound after he was let go for Josh Jacobs here.
Yeah, so Ty Chandler lasted for about 2 days of being the lead back there. But Aaron Jones, I'm happy for him that he found a spot. I think this is a good landing spot for him. It makes sense for fantasy. I don't see it changing all that much for him. I still like it's going to be Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler. They'll both be involved with Aaron Jones getting the majority of the work. But like Aaron Jones has struggled to stay healthy. So we'll see if he can make it through a full season. Last year, he had a career low 889 yards, 3 touchdowns, played 11 games. So he did miss 6 games with hamstring and knee issues. But just over the last 2 years, he's averaged 13.7 points per game in full PPR. That's fine. That's solid. It's 18th among running backs. So Aaron Jones still has a big name, but I don't think he's an elite running back fantasy asset anymore. He's aging even more. I think he's about to be 30 years old, isn't he? Or
Yeah.
29.
Yeah.
So if you can get him as a 6th round pick where he can be your low end RB2, fine. But if he goes higher than that because people are excited he's changing teams, don't love it. Also for the fact that like Kirk Cousins isn't with the Vikings anymore. We have no idea who the quarterback's going to be. It could be a disastrous offense if it's Sam Darnold, who we will talk about in the final segment. If that's their plan, I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah, I think the RB2 has got to be actually the ceiling for him because, again, this team is not a running team. We saw that they're more an afterthought, and the running back kind of helps them in the red zone. So he could have quite a few touchdowns here, and I think he can help them in the passing game. Now, we'll have to see. Like, if it's Sam Darnold, yeah, it's going to feel rough because he's going to try to throw some hero balls downfield to the receivers and may not check down as much. But if it's a rookie, I think they'll lean on Aaron Jones a little bit more, right? Because he's a veteran. He's very sturdy in pass protection. You can get him out there in key situations, and he's going to come through. That's the biggest reason why these teams just don't roll with young backs. They like a guy that can keep their quarterback upright and also get out there and be an outlet for them. So Aaron Jones, nothing fancy about this move. It's probably a volume-based thing. We saw Alexander Madison retain actually some decent value as an RB2 last year, but that's it. That's all I'm going with. I'm not getting too excited about this move.
Yeah. And then we have 2 other moves here of guys joining a backfield where they have, they have a chance to be a very high volume back. It's Devin Singletary with the Giants and then Gus Edwards to the Chargers. Gus Edwards rejoins Greg Roman. We know the Chargers are going to want to run a lot in this offense, but I do think the Chargers are a team that are going to draft a running back pretty early in this draft class. Maybe Blake Corum makes a lot of sense there with Jim Harbaugh. But then with the Giants, again, maybe they draft a running back, but they ended up paying Devin Singletary a decent penny for him to join. I hate this landing spot for Singletary. I don't like this signing for the Giants. I mean, I don't really get it. I don't love the offensive line for Singletary. I don't expect he's not a good pass catching back either, which if they're trying to replace Barkley, like Singletary is one of the worst pass catching backs you could have asked for in terms of efficiency and drops. So I don't like this signing. I'm not going to be interested in him for fantasy at all. Do you agree with me, or are you on the opposite side?
I have to wait and see a little bit. I think I want to see what they do in the draft and see if they bring in another option. Because if Singletary's the guy, keep in mind he has played with Brian Dable before, so there is some connection there. Where
It stunk for fantasy.
Yeah, he was not good. Strangely, he was not good in that situation. He was good with the Texans only down the stretch last year out of necessity because Dameon Pierce didn't fit the offense. So we'll see. I mean, yeah, we've learned this, right, with the Alexander Madison experience last year. Just because there's a path to volume doesn't mean the numbers are going to be there, right? Yeah. And right now, I don't know if the volume is even there because I think they could add more backs and really make it more confusing here. But yeah, I can't say I'm excited about Singletary. I didn't even like him that much when he was running well for the Texans. So he's just a guy, and as you mentioned, he's not going to give you much in the passing game. Where Gus Edwards also not going to give you much in the passing game. But the one thing there, the Ravens with Greg Roman, the reunion there, they're going to run quite a bit with Gus Edwards, and they're going to be maybe in position to score more with Justin Herbert. So I think you can get by with more touchdowns. Where I think with Singletary, if he's not going to give you much in the passing game, the Giants' offense is meh. He's not going to have a lot of chances to score there either. So, yeah, we'll have to see. But Edwards and Singletary, not too excited about either right now. I'm going to say flex, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. And then last off here is running back signings. Antonio Gibson goes to the Patriots. Now, I don't think he's going to be really considered as a fantasy guy that you're going to draft. Like mostly going to be a handcuff, someone that you're taking for insurance, like in case Ramondre Stevenson gets hurt. But does this move down Ramondre Stevenson for you? Because will they split a backfield now? Maybe it won't be all Stevenson. Maybe they'll do what they did last year with Zeke and Stevenson. Now it's going to be Gibson, which Gibson's also supposed to be that pass catching back, which is the one thing that we like about Stevenson. So I'm not that worried about Gibson joining, but at the same time, the move doesn't make a ton of sense to me for the Patriots.
Yeah, what I think you're going to see from the Patriots offense is much like we saw a few years ago with the Browns, right? Really heavy with running game. That's what Alex Van Pelt is going to bring there, that Browns influence. So how do you look at it? Again, I like to make these loose connections with personnel from the past. But you look at it Nick Chubb was the power guy, and they used Kareem Hunt. They used them both effectively to production, right? And Antonio Gibson, however, is not Kareem Hunt. He was not a leader of the rushing yards in the league at any point. So when you look at that, I mean, Antonio Gibson is okay, but they need playmakers, period, right? They don't have a lot of guys who can catch passes and do anything. So I think this is actually a good move for Ramondre, given what Gibson did last year was underwhelming in a lot of aspects, and he can catch passes, but I don't think that's going to say he's a dedicated pass catching back, because Stevenson has proved he can do that. So I think it's a good guy to keep him healthier. If they want to take him off the field in passing situation, they can do that a lot easier than they had done with Ezekiel Elliott. So I think in the end, this is a good thing. And I also think this offense is a good thing, because they brought back Mike Onwenu on the offensive line. They want to run the ball and set it up, and that makes a lot of sense. We're going to have a rookie quarterback and maybe Jaden Daniels, so you'd have a running quarterback there, open things up from the running backs as well. So this Gibson move, I'm not particularly interested in Gibson individually, but I don't think it deters me too much from Stevenson.
I will say the Cowboys are now, I mean, there's really no big name running backs left out there. So the Cowboys are left with Rico Dowell right now, but
Yeah.
they are going to have to be that team that we're considering is
Ezekiel
going to spend
He's
a
out
high.
there.
Yeah. Zeke Elliott might join, and then a rookie could sign there.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a spot for a rookie that could get a ton of volume in a really nice offense. So if they end up using a second or third round pick on a running back, that guy is going to have to be considered, like be thought of as a guy that could get a lot of volume. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. And then also the Raiders right now, Zamir White looking safe-ish, safe-ish. And we'll see what happens the rest of this offseason, especially with the draft. But those two spots are so wide open for some volume there. Where there hasn't been much wide receiver movement, like at all. We got a Gabe Davis signing. We got a Darnell Mooney signing. But we'll get into some wide receiver talk and then some just terrible quarterback signings here in our final segment. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Read a book, go out to dinner, go get a workout in. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. I personally utilize online therapy now for the past 3 years, and it has helped me so much with my anxiety, with my irritability. I can't say enough good things about my therapist and about my experience with online therapy. I truly believe everyone can benefit from just going to therapy themselves. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you don't have to stress because you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So we're sitting here a day and a half into the tampering period. And really, the biggest wide receiver news we got is Gabe Davis to the Jaguars. They signed him rather quickly, and they gave him a pretty nice contract. However, for fantasy, it's not going to get any better than he was with the Bills, right? It's going to be very boom or bust. Pretty much Zay Jones, but Zay Jones is still there. But however you feel about Zay Jones when he's healthy, that's how I'm going to feel about Gabe Davis. Are you on the same track as me there?
Yeah, it's interesting at the same time that they're somewhat still interested in bringing back Calvin Ridley. So
Yeah.
everyone thought, okay, they're replacing Calvin Ridley with Gabe Davis. I never saw that.
That would be, yeah,
Yeah,
that would be
that's
terrible.
you can't do that. I mean, they are pretty smart people there in Jacksonville. They're not going to say, "Oh, this is the same receiver," or "Yeah, we got an upgrade," or "This is a better value here." No, they're just looking for guys to stretch the field a little bit. And I think that was a bit of a problem with the Jaguars, that they've been oriented with Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram in the middle of the field. They got to push the ball downfield a little bit, open up those other things that are going on. So it'll be interesting what they do with Zay Jones if they bring back Calvin Ridley, because now you have a field stretcher there with Davis that might complement Ridley a little bit better than Zay Jones does. So a lot of things to still figure out here. And look, they're doing their best to bring back Ridley because they wanted him back. And I think Davis was simply easier to re-sign because he's doing it or sign, I should say, because of the cheap value, and no one really wanted him there other than probably the Chiefs. Probably looked at him a little bit, but I'd say looking at this Gabe Davis is not going to be a big fantasy asset. I think he's going to help maybe Trevor Lawrence in the end, having that asset and just opening up the field for some other guys because of the deep threat. But individually, not that interesting. We'll see what happens, however, with Ridley. And now if Davis is in the mix and gives a little bit more coverage attention downfield, then I think I feel a little bit better about Ridley should he return to the Jaguars.
Yeah, the Ridley thing's very interesting. I think they need him. They cannot just be like, okay, we got Gabe Davis. Now that's going to be our replacement. It's not like I'm even trying to hate on Gabe Davis. He's a good, deep specialist, right? He can get deep and he can catch deep balls sometimes. Sometimes he drops them, but he'll help your offense open up. And I'm fine with them signing him. I will say it's a little bit interesting because the Jaguars wide receivers had a 60.5 catch percentage last year, which ranked 26 among wide receiver groups in the NFL. And Davis has the worst catch percentage in the NFL among players with 150 targets since 2022. So I don't know really how much this helps his offense, but moving on to Calvin Ridley, right? Because I think Gabe Davis will just be kind of that DFS play, high upside in any given week, just like he was with the Bills. So the news that came out about Calvin Ridley today is that the Patriots are pushing for him, but Calvin Ridley's kind of wanting to stay with the Jaguars. I agree with Calvin Ridley. I think for his career and upside, he should want to stay with the Jaguars. I would not like him with the Patriots at all. I know it's not going to be the same like Mac Jones, Bill Belichick offense, but still, we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. It's going to be a rookie, most likely. Calvin Ridley should stay with Trevor Lawrence, even though it's not like they had the best connection, but they can keep growing on that.
Yeah, and Calvin Ridley can now play with Mac Jones too if he goes to Trevor Lawrence in practice. So they're on the same team. So there's that going. But yeah, I would not be interested at all with Calvin Ridley going to the Patriots. I just won't, because they're going to have a young quarterback. It's not a passing game that I'm particularly looking forward to having high volume. Again, we mentioned that their running commitment probably with Stevenson and Gibson now. Now, one guy I will mention, we mentioned briefly, Michelle, I think he's a sleeper we're going to watch, is Darnell Mooney. I've always liked Darnell Mooney. I think he's gotten a raw deal in terms of the way he's been used. And remember, he was very good as a rookie when he had a legitimate quarterback that was throwing him the ball, and Andy Dalton actually for a time it didn't work out chemistry-wise with Justin Fields, but now, what did we mention before? If the Falcons can get that complimentary receiver to Drake London and Kyle Pitts, it all of a sudden starts looking good here for Kirk Cousins. So I like Mooney in the spot a lot because he's not going to get the number one coverage. They're going to put guys on Drake London. I think they'll put him in a more comfortable spot to stretch the field at times on the outside. So I really like this move for the Falcons because, again, what team was looking at him before? The Chiefs. So they know what he can do as a deep ball threat. You have a big arm Kirk Cousins there as well. Now, I'm not going to go crazy for Darnell Mooney, but all of a sudden I think he's a wide receiver 3 sleeper that we need to keep an eye on.
He's definitely going to be one of those sleepers now that they have Kirk Cousins. And a big thing about Darnell Mooney, he just has to stay healthy, right? But besides Drake London, there's nobody else there. So it can't just be all the targets go to Drake London and Kyle Pitts and they're going to need a wide receiver too in that offense. So Darnell Mooney, I think, was a really nice signing for the Falcons. And with Kirk Cousins, he does become an interesting sleeper. Moving on to the other quarterbacks that signed. I mean, it's not like they're big names, but they might be the starters. So this is a worry, right? We got Gardner Minshew with the Raiders. And if he's honestly their answer at quarterback, if they do a competition between Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, how far down does Devontae Adams go then? Or are you all right with this? I mean, Gardner Minshew, it's not like he's a terrible quarterback. We saw Michael Pittman have a fine year with Minshew. So would you just keep Devontae Adams the same?
Yeah, I'd like Devontae Adams. I think I would fade some of these other targets because we know that he was locked in. Minshew was too. Pittman quite a bit last year. It was hard to get consistency out of the other Colts receivers. Now they weren't all that great. And I'd say Jacoby Myers is a little bit better than anything they had at the number 2. But I don't see Minshew necessarily starting here in this situation. Remember what he was last year, a backup to a rookie first-round pick. So that could definitely happen again here with the Raiders. So it's a wait-and-see approach. Minshew's just going to put the ball in the hands of the main guy. So he'll go through the progressions and treat the number 1, Adams in this case, as the number 1 and go there. But I'll wait and see on this one. I don't think this is their end, and neither is Sam Darnold to the Vikings. I think these are the type of moves you make ahead of the draft, knowing that you're going to draft a quarterback, to have a bridge option, to have a veteran backup that's been in multiple systems. And both of these guys have done that, right? That usually the telltale sign that you're going to go after quarterback with your first round draft pick, because these guys are system guys. You could get away with starting them a few games, but you absolutely know, based on their body work, if you overexpose them as starters, you're not going to have success. We know that with both these guys. So I think this sets up the Vikings at the number 9 overall in the draft to go after a quarterback. Not far behind them are the Broncos and Raiders. So it sets up all these teams to go after first round quarterbacks, I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting about the Vikings. You did call Sam Darnold to the Vikings yesterday
Yeah.
on yesterday's show, so good job with that. He better not be their plan
Yeah.
as starter. I
I wasn't
that
excited about it,
yeah.
but
We'll see what quarterback they end up with if they're going the rookie route, which they're going to have to do. You cannot go into this season with just Sam Darnold and no outlook to the future for any optimism. But it does worry me a little bit about Justin Jefferson and Addison and TJ Hawkinson when he comes back. A lot of mouths to feed, and when it was Kirk Cousins, we love that. Obviously, you're not going to push down Justin Jefferson too much because he's too good, right? Maybe from wide receiver 1 to like wide receiver 3. But just makes me a little bit nervous. And then also, where in the world does Justin Fields go? Get traded? We're still going to wait on that because all the spots are pretty much dried up. And it seems like, these other teams are going the rookie route and taking their bridge quarterback instead of trading for Justin Fields. So Fields might be out of starting job, at least for the moment. We'll see what happens. But that is it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every day, as Vinny and I will be back tomorrow discussing more free agency moves. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.
see you.